and hold the commanders to account? Because that is within your mandate. Or do you just focus on those constables, those very junior police officers who are acting under instructions? Of course, you need to do that. But do you go beyond that and deal with and act on their commanders who have given the instructions? Two, and this is more specific, and I want to focus now on the recent demonstrations and attendant deaths and injuries from police actions. From your records, say since the beginning of this year, up now, how many Kenyans have lost their lives from police bullets and or truncheons? And I want to tell you, very honest with you, at the last count, we had 73 lost lives. And now speaking as Azimio, you can dispute or confirm. But from your end, because you are financed by taxpayers to do exactly that, how many lives of Kenyans were lost from police brutality during the demonstrations? And how many cases have you documented of those who had injuries? Many of them are still in hospital as we speak. And if you really care, I could share with you privately outside this forum the details. It's a serious matter, I'm sure you know. Yes. I'm happy my friend Osano Mari is in agreement with that, with me on that here. Now, you have said that you are handicapped. You know, at one point I felt very sorry for you people. When the IG of police referred to you as busybodies. You see? The current one referred to you people as busybodies. Of course, you responded meekly. No. As people who have got no teeth. But even as you lament lack of prosecutorial powers, have you cared to understand that you can institute private prosecution? And you have got lawyers here in your midst. I can see veteran lawyer, Prosecutorial. Yes. Yeah, all lawyers, very eminent lawyers. And eminent thinkers like my friend Dr. Ogon. Okay? Why haven't you taken steps? Because desperate times call for desperate measures. Extraordinary times require that you adopt extraordinary measures. Because if you did that, and eventually the prosecution is stopped, which obviously would happen sometimes, then the public would have taken note. Yeah, how the kind of resolve you have. So I'm just trying to plead with you that even as you seek to be entrenched, to be empowered, to be strengthened, can you do what you need to do with the current powers that you have? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Co-Chairs. I think just picking up from where Honorable Ndai left, it came from you that indeed some of the officers have been partisan, particularly during elections. But even in the recent demonstrations, Maandamano, it was very, very clear that some of the officers are partisan. You could see officers saying, we have allowed these demonstrations to go on, we have banned those demonstrations, we will not allow those demonstrations. And Article 37 of our Constitution is very clear. That right, the freedom to demonstrate, the freedom to protest, to picket, is guaranteed by our Constitution. It does not depend on the generosity of Bungei in Nairobi or IG Kome. But you could see these officers actually purporting to allow or disallow. And some demonstrations were very violently handled. Some of us in this dialogue committee were victims. Some of us lost very close friends. Some of us lost our bodyguards, who are actually not just brutalized, injured, but some were shot and killed by police officers. And you could tell that that partisanship was very evident. They couldn't allow demonstrations here in Nairobi, but when we have issues of some money being stolen for students going to Finland, demonstrations were allowed in Eldoret. When there would be tea machines in Kericho being brought and the citizens came out to demonstrate, demonstrations were allowed. But in Kisumu, in certain parts of Western, in Nairobi, the violence, the brutality of the police was shocking. Now that you yourselves admit this partisanship, we want to hear from you. What have you done to address this issue? Because it's a growing menace to enjoyment of fundamental rights and freedoms in our Constitution, particularly Article 37. And it also goes against what you have yourselves told us in Article 244 that requires the highest standards of professionalism and discipline in our officers. Partisanship shows lack of professionalism. It also shows probably the lack of proper training, because you have said one of the issues there you look at is the training of our officers under Article 244D to the highest, in fact, not high standards, the highest standards of competence, integrity, respect for human rights, and fundamental freedoms and dignity. So these are issues we would like you to address us on. But having witnessed firsthand the brutality and abuse of human rights by our police officers, I want to ask you if you are aware that we have about 1,000 police officers from Kenya who will be dispatched to Haiti, and there's an uproar internationally because of the recent abuse of human rights by our police. The world is worried that these police officers who abused human rights here in Kenya might export that police brutality, abuse of human rights in Haiti and on the international stage where they're now being sent. Are you aware that this decision has been made? Will IPOA be involved, or have you been prepared to extend that oversight to our officers who will be going to Haiti if they are going to export the same police brutality outside our borders, which will reflect very seriously on our image internationally? We want you to address us on that, because what we know or what we've heard about Haiti, they are not the stone-throwing demonstrations that maybe you might have been told about. These are gangs that are heavily armed. These are gangs that have killed their own leaders. And we are sending our young people in uniform, in harm's way, to face these gangs. Many of them may not come back alive. Are you aware of this development? Will you be oversighting this? We would like you to address us on that. Lastly, you have said you received over 437 complaints. I think that was from the last elections. Would like to know how many have you concluded, Which ones are still how many are still under investigations out of those 437? Would also like to know, in the post-election period, that is in the Mandamano period, how many complaints have you received? And in the face of the serious police brutality witnessed in this country, and I want to confirm what the Honorable Pio and I have said, because as principals of Azimio, we have been working with these families, we have buried their dead, we have visited hospitals, and we have witnessed firsthand that those 73 Kenyans, many of them were very young, between 18 and 25, the oldest was about 30. Post-mortem reports were availed to us, showing they were shot by the police, and the cause of death were gunshot wounds, many of them to the backs of their heads, many of them in their backs. We would like you to tell us whether you have received these complaints, whether you have visited some of these mortuaries in Kisumu and other parts of this country, in Nairobi, and whether you are aware of these killings by a special unit of our police. We would like you to confirm that, whether you are aware of a team of police in Subarus that are called Special Support Units, SSU, and whether you are also, as per your mandate, oversighting this killer squad of a special police unit. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, Eugene and I today decided we are the people who speak the longest, so we manage you as you manage me. Obilianga?
Thank you, Chair. I think I'll be rather brief compared to the previous speaker. I'm normally brief. I'll go straight onto the two-thirds gender rule and your input as IPOA. First of all, I want to appreciate that you have made your presentations very clearly on that. But again, underscore the fact that you are actually, the police force is really suffering from the two-thirds gender balance. Looking at the numbers you have mentioned, 10,000, 14,000 against the 200,000 or how many thousands of police. What have you done as a sector? Or what do you recommend in order to cover up this? I have seen during recruitments the bias that is there, especially on the girl child. It's like you allocate very few numbers for the girls, and yet they have equal opportunity in this country. Why hasn't it actually brought up a formula? Like we are trying to sit here and bring up a formula on how to cater for the two-thirds gender rule and let it also flow across the police, especially on the girl child. Secondly, you also mentioned on something on the professionalism, I think of the IPOA board or IPOA, whatever, generally. You said 3/4 of the composition is actually officers. Why haven't you not put up a recommendation on other professionals to be included?
National Police Service.
The National Police Service
Commission.
Service Commission to be included apart from just officers and maybe the few other professionals that you have. Why can't we have a scenario where you cut across all sections? We have the professionals like the lawyers, even teachers, stuff like that. And finally, I get back to the demonstrations. During the demonstrations, people's properties were destroyed, businesses were devastated, and the police did very little actually to protect these groups. I can't say it was only in Azimio regions. Everybody was affected across the board. Kenya Kwanza sections were affected, Azimio regions were affected. So generally, what did you do, or what do you recommend that can be done? Or have you done even anything about it in the first place? Thank you.
Amina.
Thank you, Chair. My first question will be on the statements that were made by the Inspector General, Koome. He denied about the police brutality during the protests. He even went ahead to assert that Azimio la Umoja is hiring dead bodies and trying to paint a bad picture to the government and towards the police force. So as IPOA, did you investigate into this matter? Did you find out whether these people were dead? Were they really hired? Or were they really killed? So what's your take on that? Question number 2, we have also noticed as Kenyans that there is the raiding and sometimes kidnapping of certain high-profile individuals in broad daylight. IPOA, do you have anything to say about that? Thank you.
And now to just make my comments. But one of the reasons I really want IPOA to work is, you remember I was a commissioner in KCHR. And I remember walking into the late Saitoti's office and asking him to ensure that there's a policing oversight authority. In fact, this bill, the draft came actually from the Commission on Human Rights. I used to do policing oversight within the security sector reforms program. And I realized the scale and magnitude. So my first question to you, Anne, 10 years on, what are the deficiencies? Because definitely there are deficiencies, particularly within the Act. The anchorage in law or in the Constitution is one. We try to find place for IPOA within Article 59 of the Constitution so that we can create, upload, because it says that through that you can create more than one commission. But I think we were not able to necessarily locate it within the Article 59 commissions. I do agree, but what else do you think needs to be done in terms of legal reforms of the IPOA Act to upscale it to that extent where it is effective? 2, the president came under the promise that there will be no extrajudicial killings. And I do still believe that that is the position. The justification would only be what is contained in the National Police Act on the use of force as measurable and directly proportional to the loss of the lives of others. So I do hope you will respond to some of those queries by Opio on the basis that response to the realm of the law, rule of law. I do not think the Kenya Kwanza government is in any way in support of an errant police force, a rogue police, or a regime police. But the second last question, the whole idea of police reforms, and you're supposed to be the police auditor. You're like an audit firm for the police, not only in terms of its accountability, but in terms of tracking its reforms, unless that mandate is not assumed in that act. The whole idea about police reforms was to move us away from a regime police to a democratic policing service. In your assessment, I can see very eminent people here, lawyers, doctors, social scientists. What do you think, how much progress would you say we have made from the advent of the 2010 Constitution to move ourselves away from a regime police to a policing service? And in that event, what more is required in terms of legislative, structural, or policy reforms? And lastly, the whole idea of also these shifts, there was the whole idea of police reforms or security sector reforms was premised on the fact that we needed to move away from the securitization of our democracy, that paradigm, to the democratization of our security. We move away from the securitization of our democracy, kwamba kila kitu ni serikali, matter of national security. In fact, there was a Director General of the INIS who tried to insert a clause to limit the Bill of Rights to national security. We discovered it at some point. So, at that time when we were voting the 2010 Constitution. So, In other words, human rights is not limited in the purview solely of national security. There are limitations that are created by the Constitution itself. So we wanted to move ourselves to the democratization of our security. The democratization of our security means people should be engaged more engaged in participation of our security apparatus. So the question will be, do you think this police service is doing enough in terms of democratization of our security outside these conventional things of nyumba kumi sijui and vitu kama hizo, or DCs and DOs and chiefs and so whatnot? Is there been sufficient shift in terms of the paradigm? But finally to Opio and I think we will really expect an independent report from your team, and you can be very sure that there is no government that is not limited by the rule of law, and there's no government, the Kenya Kwanza government is not keen or is not intent on protecting where rogue police officers have been involved in taking the lives of others in a manner brutal. So therefore it should not be purported by their sentiments that there is any sanitization on our part. If you do your job, then I'm quite sure actions will be taken. But my last comment, I do not agree with giving you prosecutorial powers. There must be separation of powers. That's why we wanted the police to investigate, the DPP to prosecute. So you must continue to investigate, let another arm prosecute.
Quickly, please respond.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll try to respond to some. I may invite my colleagues to respond to the others. What has IPOA done within its mandate? Honorable Dai, Chair, you raised this question, what has IPOA done within its mandate? Whether we've been able to hold police to account, and what have we done in terms of command responsibility? I would say that IPOA has done a lot. Probably one of our deficiencies is not going too much to the media. But in terms of accountability, we've done a lot. We've done many recommendations. We've completed record investigations within the time of our lifespan as the board that is continuing. And indeed, we find ourselves between a rock and a hard place. Here we are being told we haven't done enough. You talk to the police officers, they don't want to see us. They say we are the worst team that ever came into being. We've increased the number of files that are with the DPP. We found about 60 files in courts. We've moved that number to 170. We have over 380 files lying at the DPP. And in total, we've forwarded over 500 files to the DPP. So a lot has been done. We've engaged DPP to try and see how that process can move faster. And at one point during the former DPP, he established a human rights desk to help review those files. And there are 2 points to it. One could be those that we have recommended prosecution so that they make progress, and could be those that are pending and the officers need to be exonerated and the cases are still pending. So it cuts both ways. When these files are not attended quickly, there are those officers who are suffering, their files are still pending. And also there are those Kenyans whose files need to be prosecuted and the files are pending. It's work in progress. There are many reasons that have been given for this, including the fact that DPP, of course, receives files from many people, and those files are handed against the capacity that that office has. In terms of command responsibility, we've tried. We have Baby Pedo case, which was initially done public inquest, and the judiciary recommended prosecution of very many officers. It was brought back to DPP. We supported DPP in investigating that case, and our conclusion was that there must be command responsibility. Again, that file is still sitting with the DPP. But our recommendation is that there has to be an element of command responsibility. in certain matters. Baby Pendo is a good case. There is a case we call Nambale that was withdrawn without further consultation to us, where we had made recommendation for command responsibility. Again, that office does not report to us in terms of oversight, so when cases are withdrawn, the law allows them to do that. There is nothing much we can do. But in terms of IPOA position, there are instances where there is need for command responsibility. In terms of the next question that the chairman asked was deaths and injuries arising out of the demonstrations, the report that we shall be submitting has that data. In summary, we received 237 complaints involving 359 complainants. That is the period.
You say the report you're submitting now or when?
No.
The report you shall be submitting has got that data.
Yes, the one that you have directed that we sent through the email.
Okay.
Has that data.
And is it for election or post-election period?
CEO will be speaking into that, but it's also available. That data is also available. In terms of demonstrations, we received 237 during this period, between Sabasaba and the time there was ceasefire when this team was established. We received 237 complaints involving 359 complainants. Deaths that we received as IPOA are 57 that are under active investigation. Some of them are the tail deaths. Deaths that we have captured, deaths, before.
Of death?
Yes. Within the period of demonstration.
That you confirmed?
That the reports that IPOA has. The data that we have on deaths is 57.
Not 73.
Not 73. And this is how they are classified. Kisumu 33, Nakuru 2,
slowly.
Nairobi 20.
Come again?
They are all under investigation, but Kisumu we had 33, Nakuru 2, Nairobi 20, Kakamega 2. Injuries were a number of them, and all that data is in this report that we shall be submitting to the committee. In terms of extrajudicial killings and the ability to institute private prosecution, I think Honorable Omar has already spoken into that. We've been seeking prosecutorial powers because you're a government entity, and you have had the position of the crafters of these documents. The position is that there should be separation of powers, and therefore, as a government entity, unless this team gives us prosecutorial powers, the law ties us to make recommendations to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution.
So are you saying the law is such that it constrains you from undertaking private prosecution?
Yes.
Explicitly?
We cannot do private because you're government. We are a government entity.
Under what law?
IPOA Act.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking you. Is it explicit in the Act that you can't undertake private prosecution? And if you juxtapose that with the provisions of Article 157, let's help us understand. Yeah.
IPOA can do private prosecutions. What we are saying is that when we do our investigations and need to give recommendations to the ODPP, we have to wait until the ODPP now either agrees with our recommendations or returns the file to us to ask us to add on the evidence that he thinks perhaps does not meet the threshold. And during that process, because sometimes we finish our investigations very quickly, most of the investigations are over. But as you have heard from the figures, the files that are pending before the ODPP are too many. And we continue doing our investigations and forwarding our recommendations there. That's why we were asking for prosecutorial powers.
So, Waiganjo?
Yes.
Some of those files can stay there forever?
Yes.
In theory?
Sometimes in theory, they will stay there forever. sometimes when they go to court, they'll be withdrawn without reference to the independent policing.
Can you do us a favor, Wigancho? Can you give us an analysis of the files that you have taken to the DPP,
certainly,
those that have been prosecuted and those that are still pending?
That will be done right away, Chair. We have our CEO here who is in charge of the Secretariat, and we will give out those figures. But on to the matter that was also brought forth on the extrajudicial killings, we would also want this committee to take extrajudicial killings in law now legislatively from Manda. Yeah, Manda extrajudicial killing. We want a demarcation in law because we talk about extrajudicial killings and there is also Manda. So we want a clarity in that, and that can only be found in law. And then on abductions, we want a clear reference between abduction and enforced disappearance. Because the law is broad. We do not have a clear-cut law. When you say, because you cannot, sometimes there's an abduction and then you reappear. So you had disappeared, but you have appeared. So we are not clear on when are you abducted or when there is an enforced disappearance. The president also assured us that we would be carrying out an inquest, an inquiry on enforced disappearance and extrajudicial killings. So we want that to come forth so that the citizens can come and give their stories. Because the files are many, we've post-mortem reports, we have a challenge of witnesses coming to us because also the witness protection program does not have sufficient budget to cover our witnesses. We have lost witnesses clearly when we have good cases. So those are some of the challenges we have. And I want to leave it now so that you can get the actual figures from our CEO.
Salake, you're the CEO unless otherwise.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to repeat what has already been spoken to, but probably just to clarify on the issue of the command responsibility, that as IPOA for the first time, innovatively together with the DPP, we've been able to take a case to court. Actually, the Bipendo case is a case in court where 12 senior police officers from county commanders are now in court. And that is by way of us taking the responsibility higher, beyond the constables on the ground. So this is a live matter which is currently in court, and we will be able to see the progression of that case in court. I don't know, Chair, you may wish to speak to the Haiti question. I'll leave that to the Chair. On the issue of extrajudicial killings, we have, of course, what has been explained by Honorable Waiganjo, but beyond that, as an authority, we have clarity on what we are doing. The cases we are able to investigate where it has been determined through investigations that we are able to identify the people responsible in those enforced disappearance or in extrajudicial killing have been taken through investigations. However, where we are not able to determine directly the police involvement, the commission or the authority has decided that it will undertake public inquiry, which will be able to, to determine exactly the circumstances and also determine accountability. So I think that is all I would want to clarify.
Wait, you are still on the floor.
Yes.
What about the other, you see, when you stretch your imagination in terms of the electoral injustices?
Yes.
There were complaints here by IEBC.
Yes.
The officers were assaulted, murdered, etc., etc.
Yes.
There's been little police action. Can you please also look into why there's police inaction on complaints filed by IEBC commissioners and the commission itself on part of the abductions, murder, assault, and other vestiges against the law? Secondly, I remember there are these men who are working in the KK Secretariat, the Indian nationals, who were actually abducted by the DCI and were killed in some container. they had a killing container somewhere. What is the extent of the fate of those men from the DCI?
Okay, maybe picking up on the last one about the Indians. I think this is a matter, again, which is, of course, in court. And between IPOA and the DCI, we were able to make a presentation. And I think I would rather ask the head of legal to speak to that matter with clarity.
Yes, thank you. As the CEO has stated, that the matter is currently in court. The matter is being handled by, of course, IPOA and also the Internal Affairs Unit of the National Police Service is dealing with that investigation, and the matter is currently in court.
On the issue of IBC, yes, there were the reports, of course, cases we are handling where IBC officers were assaulted allegedly by police. A case we are handling is the case of the IBC officer in Wajir, and we have made a very advanced investigation on this, and these are matters which are basically towards conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. on the issue of partisan approach and the IG banning demonstrations, I'll ask the Vice Chair to speak into that. Then Commissioner Mutahi can speak into the issue of Haiti.
Let's try to now wind up. Yes, within the next 5 minutes.
Okay.
Dr. Deputy Chair.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, chairs and honorable members. It's true. In our records and in our presentation, we mentioned that there is some partisan in the police, but generally I want to put it clearly that not all police are partisan. Of course, everybody is relating with the police in one way or the other. It is true. If you look at the statistics from IPOA, about 99% of the police are doing a good job, but 1% has some issues. And sometimes when one person becomes rogue or one person makes a statement, it's not a general statement for all the police. Of course, somebody may be in a command position many times, and where they go wrong, it is very clear with the IPOA statement today that we have no compromise at all. We may look like we are crying here and there, but statistically, if you look at this document later, you will realize that no police officer is above any action from IPOA. And we have summoned even people in very high ranks. So bipartisan, yes, because of course you can see some elements here and there. But generally, the police are doing a good job. Of the IG, of course, people have the right to say what they want to when they get the podium. And interestingly, chairs, we have asked the IG why he made that statement. And as he denied other statements he made before, he also denied that he did not make reference to IPOA during the busybody statement. However, he made it, and we are cautious. We are cautious about the engagement and what we need to do in official and formal way. On the question of hired bodies, that was strange. It was very strange. And members, individuals have ways of saying what they want to. IPOA, as given by these figures, is very clear. We go to witness in the crime scene area. We go and attend the post-mortem. Post-mortem reports are with us in all general reports. And I think that should not be a substantive issue to discuss for now. Thank you, Chair.
What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you say is strange? What do you mean exactly?
I mean, when he makes those statements,
yes,
those statements must be factual and supported by figures, right? But you know, a blanket statement
But that is if he's being professional.
Yeah.
That is if he's being professional.
Can Doreen please answer the last set of questions?
Just before she answers, just the issue of two-thirds general rule is something that we always talk about, something we have also raised with the National Committee in Parliament to ensure that in terms of recruitment, they increase the number of women, because they do in such a way that women are not, even in the entry level, they are not given equal opportunity. So that's something we have picked up, even at the top level. In fact, there used to be Madam Kaindi, and once she was removed, there was no more representation there. So it's something that we really want the parliamentarians to pick it up themselves and ensure that that thing happens, that we get top leadership of women. Thank you.
Okay, Doreen.
Thank you, sir. On that,
Make it brief.
Absolutely. On just a quick one to add on to what Commissioner Fatma has said, and this is a question by Honorable Bilenga, that what have we done to ensure at least matters of female gender are considered in the service? We are involved. We conducted the first ever Women in Policing conference in the country, and we are pleased to inform you that it was very successful. And we are also supporting the establishment of Association of Female Police Officers in the service so that they're able to advance their own concerns within the service, and associations as recognized under Section 87 of NPSA. Now, on the issue of Haiti, we have also learnt of the same from the media, and we have not been officially engaged on the same, but this is an appreciation that the Act, the NPSA, that is the National Police Service Act, provides for, or rather allows the Inspector General or the service generally to partner regionally and internationally with other services in matters of policing. Now, how the same is regulated, remember this is, once they leave the country, it's under international law. Remember, our scope is territorial. We are only able to deal with our officers while within our territorial space and when under the command of the Inspector General. That said, we are very concerned about the welfare of our officers as they engage or live for Haiti, and most importantly, training for them to be able to carry out the duties they are required to do while there. Now, one other issue on our act is that we can investigate officers during and even when they've left the service. So whatever the circumstances, we believe that if allowed under the various instruments that have been entered into, probably through mutual legal instrument by the Attorney General, the IG, and other entities that are involved, we hope that IPOA scope will be entrenched to allow us to deal with this matter when they are back into the territories. We are open to explore modalities of dealing with such, because this appears to be our first. And like KDF, where we've had this kind of processes, IPOA, in this instance, we are going to explore approaches on how to deal with the same. Sorry, sir, quick one on the issue of legislative intervention to allow the authority to proceed or carry out its duty. Truth is, if we don't have oversight, then in the service, NPS, or even those other services, we have seen what has happened, for example, in Marsabit, in Wajir, with the KWS, and so on. We request that entrench oversight for all those entities. The police feel targeted whenever they're involved even in a multi-agency approach or exercise of policing nature. It's only the police that are investigated. The other agencies are dealt with internally and mostly not in a very open manner. We request that we have existed from 2011 to date without regulations. Therefore, we're requesting that the regulations that are currently before the House, tabled before the Committee on Delegated Legislation, please be fast-tracked to enable us have a legal framework that is self-executing. The other issue, sir, is about compliance of the Act as it exists. That's a big challenge for us, and it's legislative in nature. We don't know to what extent we are supposed to be suing the various commanders to notify us of deaths that occur within or during police operation. This is an area we would want clarity on what IPOA ought to do or what action need to be taken by commanders who do not notify the authority within the 24-hour rule. Then, of course, give us teeth to bite. I know Honorable Hassan has indicated that we shouldn't be given prosecutorial power. Truth be told is that the more people review the files, the more the delay and justice is actually, both for the police officer and for the people of Kenya, is delayed and therefore not served as it ought to be. Other challenges, sir, is that we are a young entity rather, with a number of staff that is currently 260, and we have an approved establishment of nearly 3,000. We are requesting for funding to allow us to be able to spread ourselves throughout the Republic and, most importantly, serve in all Huduma centers. It is almost impossible to even explain to people what we do since we are not visible. We are requesting for funding to allow us for a planned expansion and so on. And we also request that through this dialogue, National Dialogue Committee, kindly uptake of our recommendations. All these matters, we have 26 reports submitted to the NPS, submitted to the Cabinet Secretary and Parliament, both houses, and we request, including to all the 47 county assemblies, we are required by law to submit the reports. But uptake of our recommendations is a big challenge, and we don't know how many or how much should we seek court intervention to ensure enforcement. From the oversight point of view and legislative point of view, Parliament help us deal with this matter. Thank you, sir.
Mwesh, make it very brief, because Mwesh, make it very brief. I like this subject is important for this committee, but make it very brief.
Thank you very much, Chair. Indeed, I want to say that let the committee not be worried that the IG, the Inspector General of Police, would make that kind of a statement and get away with it. I think it's important for the committee to know that we do have pending complaints against the IG himself. But I want the good doctor here to make a conclusion so that on the same issue of hired bodies.
Thank you. Chairman, I want to say that when the IG makes a statement that bodies have been bought and transferred, we as IPOA, we just counter it with facts. And the fact of the matter is, I want to tell you from the forensic angle, a policeman who does not want to kill does not shoot above the waist. You shoot below the waist to immobilize. When we get pathology reports and we are capable of telling whether this was long range, short range shooting by the entry and exit of the bullet, or if the bullet is lodged within. And therefore, the reports that we have got those facts. The challenge sometimes, and I want to bring it out very carefully, is when we want forensic analysis of the weapon that was used. Then we sometimes encounter bottlenecks because this laboratory is under the control of the DCI. The DCI, to me, and I want you legislators, is part of the NPS. He is under the command of the IG, and he cannot be independent. He denies or they alter the evidence because they have to give us the report of the weapon used. They say, as per our analysis, these weapons were not in the possession of the police as at the time of the action. That is one thing we encounter. Secondly, I want to say, do our police suffer from frustration? Are they in the wrong profession? Or because of the amount of misplaced aggression that we see? I want to say that the police commanders have told us that when they go for recruitment, some of the people they recruit to Kiganjo College is forced on them by powers from elsewhere. And they are wondering whether the product they are training for 9 months in Kiganjo are actually coming out to be policemen and women, or people whose relatives and friends bought their way into the police training. I want to say this because we have seen incidents where police with their batons, and the case of the 2 brothers in Luanda, whom you buried, the post-mortem was explicit, saying they actually died of rungus, not even a gun. Why would a professional police officer continue to inflict injury to somebody whom they have already subdued, instead of either arresting the person and putting in the lorry and go and process the crime? Is it frustration inwardly? Is it because they think that they lord it over the population of the populace? We have got those issues. So I want to answer that statement of the IG that we will counter it with the facts. The only thing is that he may use his professional influence to deny us the ballistic and forensic reports from the forensic lab. And we must say that we have made a proposal that this forensic laboratory should be given autonomy away from the DCI. That's a proposal we have made, so that it does its job not only for the police. There are very many other organizations that would want to use that laboratory, including even the national government chemist, including the National Public Health Laboratories. There are certain things that they will need to have analyzed there. We have got other institutions that would use that lab. So domiciling it strictly under the IG also hampers our work, because the DCI are part and parcel of the police. But we get the facts from that.
Thank you, Dr. Final word. I think I'll let the chair have the final word. Please, just no, Eugene, just let the chair.
No, there's a question they have not answered.
Yeah, just let the chair have a final word, and
yes,
then
and
if it is unanswered, we will ask again.
Chair, while you're concluding,
can you please, Eugene, let the chair just say something?
Yes, as she concludes, there's one question you have not answered about the abuse of human rights and the special support unit embedded in the police that has been responsible for some of these atrocious
You've asked the question. Let her answer, please.
Can you respond to that?
Chairman, could I seek for your indulgence to allow a question you raised on democratization of policing to be answered by Commissioner Torrey very shortly, please? Because that came from the chair.
Okay.
1 minute, please.
Yeah, 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. You did raise the issue of securitization of security to democratization of security. I hope I understood your explanation on what you meant, and I would like to say that under our mandate of inspection of police premises, we do look out for human rights abuses and compliance, and we make our recommendations to the IG on what needs to be done, but also work with the officer in charge of the station to see what they can improve on. Currently, as a result of our recommendation, we have CPUs, that is child protection units, being built in a number of police stations. Also, from our monitoring mandate on police operations, we also monitor standards, human rights standards that are supposed to be maintained, and thereafter we make our recommendations. Also, on the issue of democratization, while carrying out our inspections, Chair, we also look out to see whether police stations have actually set up or established community policing committees. And what we have found is that a number of police stations have not come up with community policing committees, which involves membership of members of the public. So we want to pray that perhaps that's something you can pick up. We have made our recommendations to the IG to ensure that each police station and OCS complies with that requirement. Finally, there is also the requirement in law for establishments of county policing authorities. With county policing authorities, Mr. Chairman, this is supposed to be established by governors. And this, again, very, very few governors have established this. And the challenge here is that the county commissioners are supposed to be members of these county policing authorities. And there's a bit of conflict because the county commissioners have the county security committees. And so they feel uncomfortable to sit under a committee that is chaired by the governor on policing and security matters. So that's something you may need to look at. On tracking of police reforms, Chairman, we are currently working on all the recommendations that we have made to the IG and tracking and seeing which ones have been implemented, which ones have not been implemented, and we will share the report with yourselves. Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you very much, Chairman. As we conclude, I want to thank this committee for giving us an opportunity. In terms of special police units, for us, any injury or death arising out of police action, whether special or non-special, we treat it the same. It's an injury or death arising out of police action. And therefore, they are all held accountable, irrespective of the units. However, at the risk of repeating something that has been said here repeatedly, it's important that the bill that has been brought by Senate, has been published by Senate, Security Services Amendment Bill 2023, be supported to expand the mandate of IPOA, because we find when there is multi-agency operations, then IPOA is limited. We follow up the issues, then we find probably something was committed by somebody who is not necessarily a police officer in the way we know it at the NPS, and therefore our ability then to that extent gets challenged. So for us to be very effective, it's important that IPOA be entrenched in the Constitution as a Chapter 15 commission, and its mandate spread over uniformed services in regards to civilian engagement with all uniformed services, of course, except the defense, so that they can be held to account. Because you'll find that the multi-agency approach has all kinds of uniformed services.
Well, when you once any security service, including the armed forces, is called in aid of civilian authority, then civilian law applies.
Yeah,
so they must be held accountable.
When they are under the operation of the IG. When they are under the operation of the IG, then they come under civilian oversight.
Yeah.
Maybe just one last one in relation to what she was trying to answer. I wanted to chip in, but you came in handy. Some time back, His Excellency instituted the Maraga task force on police reforms. Do you have any report, or have you received anything on that since it was instituted? Thank you.
She sits in that task force.
Thank you, Mheshimiwa. His Excellency the President did appoint me as a member of the task force headed by Honorable CJ, and we are still on course and shall be giving our report. What we have discussed here is what we have as IPOA. In fact, in detail, the report will shed light on matters that affect police, NYS, and prisons, and prison service, and in addition to that, it will go into equipping, training, all these issues that have been asked by Mheshimiwa Eugene on SSU, or rather special police units and so on. So it's a very detailed report. I'm not under any right to share any view on that.
So Doreen, first and foremost, I want to thank you for one thing that you said about the mission to Haiti, about training and welfare. And I associate myself with the views of Dr. Ludumpoe that 99% of our police officers is actually okay. Yes. Because we don't want to create an impression when this mission is in Haiti by some of the sentiments here that those Kenyan men and women have gone there to carry out abuses and put our sons and daughters in harm's way. I think they will carry out themselves with the highest international standards and training.
I believe so.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity. We can see the leader of majority has just walked in. This is the team from IPOA. My name is Anne Makori, the chairperson. We've had engagements with the team, some of them very hot. but we believe we are equal to the task. We shall be submitting, as directed by the chair, joint chair, a written report that comprises of what we've said and other details that we think would help this committee arrive at an appropriate decision. Thank you once again for the opportunity.
Thank you to IPOA. Weganja was pleasantly surprised to see umekuwa policing expert. But I really appreciate, we gave the length of time we did for this particular IPOA engagement because of the extent of which it is relevant to this committee. And I really thank you. You actually realized we did not, Article 43 and everything else, we really wanted this information from you. And we are grateful for your honesty and openness. And we hope we can get the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next group. Okay, I think we are set. Are we? So welcome. This is Mandelier. We have got maximum 20 minutes in this session. I'm sure members here are known to you, but we can save time. Is it? Yes. Then proceed and introduce yourselves and make the presentation.
Start our way, which is to say a prayer, a Muslim prayer and a Christian prayer. Mama Fatima, say a prayer, a brief one.
Let's say a prayer. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين.
So that I'm sure has not taken 2 minutes. You gave us 20. We can still work with 18 or 15. So I am here with some of the national team. And in Mandelier, we work on regional balance. So I have representation from Nyanza, she will speak, the National Secretary. I have Secretariat here from Eastern. I have Rift Valley, National Vice Chair. I have Coast, National Vice Chair. I have National Treasurer. And I have Mount Kenya represented at the end. So basically, we are 5 regions here on behalf of the 8. So then allow me to start. His Excellency Honorable Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka in absentia.
Please avoid those protocols.
We avoid those protocols.
Yeah,
we
just go straight.
But then must you say leader of majority, because we are happy to have you there, and Wandai, and then we continue. Our preamble. Mandelier is a non-governmental organization which seeks to nurture and empower women through various capacity building interventions that promote women's rights and sustainable livelihoods in the society. Mandelier turned 70 years, somebody raised the book, turned 70 years last year, and it is the oldest and largest women organization in Kenya. It is a unique national women grassroots NGO with organization structures in every administrative unit in Kenya, over 17,000 elected leaders, and we have over 4 million members and about 25,000 affiliated women groups. The organization is managed from the headquarters by an elected National Steering Committee and a secretariat. The CEO is here and our team, ended from headquarters by the National Chairperson. Considering our large grassroots membership and presence, we give this submission as a representation of all our members and indeed the women of Kenya, and we do own the two women there, Mama Wabulianga and Mama Mnazi. You are our members, you are our sisters, and we are happy to have you there. We then thank the National Dialogue Committee, NADCO, for inviting us to give this presentation today as stakeholders, and we commend this committee for establishing this consultative process. Mandelier indeed has been on record constantly calling for a national dialogue, because it is undeniable that dialogue and consultation among Kenyans is crucial for promotion of peace and national unity. We as mothers and custodians of the family will always call for dialogue, as we do in our homes. This submission is on behalf of then the team I've talked about, NSC, as I've introduced the members, the board, which is 58 members, basically 47 county chairs and 11 national officials. It is the biggest board, I'm sure, in this country. The annual general meeting, AGM, which is about 800 members and will be meeting later in the year. Message from our patron, Mama Phoebe Asio, who is abroad, and greetings from the acting patron, Mama Zibora Kitoni. So I go then straight to recommendations of the agenda set out by this committee. Number 1, electoral justice and related matters. Restructuring and reconstitution of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, the IEBC. We support restructuring and reconstitution of IEBC and addressing gaps that we have identified as follows. Number 1, the Secretariat. The IEBC Secretariat should undergo capacity building given the sensitivity of their job. The Secretariat needs to win public confidence that is professional, inclusive, and impartial. IEBC Commissioners Selection Panel. The selection panel should be agreed upon by all players. It should be inclusive and open, with the selection profile was not conclusively done in the last 2 elections, 2017-2022. I am not even sure whether it was done properly in 2013. Boundaries delimitation. We recommend for boundaries delimitation to be carried out as constitutionally required, but ensure other aspects other than population are taken into consideration, because what we normally hear, we only hear more about the numbers in some constituencies, and we do not hear ethnicity taken into consideration, geographical size, common interests, and history of marginalization. We are aware some are in the Constitution, but we want to emphasize. Remember, we are women and we are married cross-board, so we also have a bit of this information. Audit of the 2022 presidential election. We are on record many times calling for dialogue, as I've said, and now that this bipartisan team is already working, I am sure this committee will get a solution. Therefore, our feeling as a mother institution is we leave this matter to His Excellency the President, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, CGH, President of the Republic of Kenya, Commander-in-Chief of the Defense Forces, and the former Prime Minister, Raila Odinga, to now deal with that matter. Mandelier views, we don't want to dig deep into that. In future, we therefore then recommend upcoming elections, we support an audit of the elections to be carried out within 3 months after inauguration of the elections. That then, within 3 months after inauguration, we can be done with auditing and the country can go back to work. Outstanding constitutional matters. Article 43 of the Constitution, the cost of living and related issues. Current economic situation has families struggling to meet daily needs due to high food prices and other basic needs and high unemployment. We therefore then give the following recommendation. We would appreciate a separation of matters to do with cost of living and politics, because cost of living is affected by other external factors, such as we had a prolonged drought. We even witnessed the war Ukraine just did not start, but we saw politics playing in. As mothers, we strongly speak out against our children being reduced to voters and wish to see them benefit from the votes they cast. We therefore recommend that county governments should spearhead job creation, as this was the intention of devolution, which Mandelier was completely involved in, of resources to be utilized in poverty alleviation. This is how we can therefore address the presence of poverty in Kenya 60 years after independence. Promoting national unity and inclusivity in public appointments and adequate checks and balances. We give the following recommendations to address the issues of governance, impunity, and independent institutions, constitutionalism, and the rule of law in Kenya. We propose the following. Civic education programs that raise public awareness about the importance of good governance, the rule of law, and accountability. Incorporation and entrenchment of national values, and the women here, please hear us. Entrenchment of national values into school curriculums from an early age. What we are seeing today in values can only be healed if we start from the bottom, and therefore we hope that you can hear us here as mothers. Emulate institutions that are practical examples of inclusivity. For instance, Mandelier here practices inclusivity in their models, and we have brought you all the documents. I think somebody should take them over for them to look at as we continue talking. Separation of governance and politics. Fidelity of political, or separation of governance and politics. Fidelity of political parties, coalitions, and law on multi-party democracy. I continue? Yes. Preventing interference with political parties stroke coalitions. Recommendation. Enforce transparency and accountability measures for elected officials. Political parties requiring them to disclose their funding sources, expenditures, and activities to the public. Entrenching funds into the Constitution, the National Government Constituency Development Fund. We support the entrenchment of the National Government Constituency Development Fund, NGCDF, in the Constitution, and recommend the following changes. And those in front of us, many are MPs. So we recommend here, please, that ensure women representation in the CDF, incorporating grassroots leaders such as Mandelier Wanawake, right of the ward, and other players, sub-counties or county chairs. Women in church. We have women in Mothers Union, very good leaders, women in the Catholic Women Association, the Women Guild, and even women in the mosque, our Muslim sisters. Retired teachers in their bursary committees. A practical example is Mandelier chairs who sit in the county anti-corruption civilian oversight committees. We are in 40 counties, and we do a lot of work. The fund should address social issues such as teenage pregnancies and vulnerable children such as orphans. I dare say, and here as mothers, that our girls We are number 3 in the world for girls giving birth at 13 years, and that then leaves them to be grandmothers at 26 years. That none of you want to see in your homes, even from your children. So we are asking for a lot of listening into this. The National Government Affirmative Action Fund, we support the entrenchment of the National Government Affirmative Fund, GAF, in the Constitution and recommend the following change. Engagement of grassroots leaders, women, community leaders in programs supported this fund. My sisters who are in the women leadership, we want to feel the impact of the numbers we have, so that then the journey Mandelier has worked for 70 years starts to get some fruits. The fund to address very specific issues like drug and substance abuse, and also the teenage pregnancies we are talking about. It is not nice to hear we are number 3 in the world. That talks about the country we are starting to be. The Senate Oversight Fund, we support the entrenchment of the Senate Oversight Fund in the Constitution because the Senate plays a critical role in overseeing funds allocated to counties, just like we have supported the other one. A constitutionally established Senate Oversight Fund would ensure that Senate has the necessary resources to fulfill its duties and effectively. The rider here, however, all these funds must have an impact at the grassroots. We must feel the results because we are all here based on the grassroots. Establishment and entrenchment of state offices, the office of the leader of the official opposition. We support establishment and entrenchment of the office of the official opposition for enhanced political stability and oversight of government. The office of the cabinet secretary, we too support establishment and entrenchment of the office of the prime cabinet secretary. Ensure effective service delivery and governance. Before I go to conclusion, I am sure I've not done 10 minutes. I then want to pose a question. On Monday, we were 12 years after we lost Professor Wangari Maathai, our very icon. In 2007, 2008, some of us were in that journey. She called us in our Green Belt movement. And I say this with absolute humility. It is not part of this document. But if I don't say it, we will not be doing justice to Professor Wangari Maathai. All of us in international forums, we talk about her. So what I pose for you here, this committee, is that when Professor called us 2007, 2008, it was during the Kofi Annan negotiating team which was going on in Serena. And she was there herself, the late patron, our patron, Mama Jane Kiano, Professor Jiko Kabira, this can be checked from her, Rose Waruhio, Enda Gashukia, and myself. And what Professor suggested to us is that Kenya needed a prime minister to avoid a lot of things we see going into the future. I rest my case. I do not want to say much, but having come from a woman of our structure who is not with us today, who talked to Kenyans about climate change and the world that we never had, today we see where we are. So using her again, I pose to say that came from her. And I think we need to throw it to you. We are mothers and will tell you with absolute truth and sincerity. In conclusion, in summary, Mandelier therefore expresses appreciation for the National Dialogue Committee, endeavors and eagerly anticipates the committee's development of approaches that encourage positive political involvement, as well as the promotion of peace, reconciliation among the populace following the post-2022 general election polarization in the country and into the future. And with those many remarks, I thank you, and may the good Lord bless you.
Thank you very much, the chairperson and your team, for a very concise presentation. We feel that our work is enriched by a very invaluable presentation. Unless there's any other question from our side, we shall be... Okay, Honorable Wambilanga.
Not really a question. Thank you so much, Chair. Just a comment. I want to commend the team for the recommendations that you have brought forth. We fully associate ourselves with, as actually me and my sister here, with your sentiments. Only that you are on the selection panel, you just said it has to be inclusive. And I gave some other recommendations. But you didn't touch on the political part about this selection panel. Should it be political or Should politicians be involved? What is your take on that? And then also, on the audit of presidential elections, as female leaders of this country, I feel that it's important that you put in your take. What is your take? As much as you want to be non-partisan, I'm sure we have individual views which we would like to hear as a commission. Thank you.
We'll ask a number of questions, then you can answer all of them together. And maybe I could also pick up from where Honorable Mbilenga has left. And I thank you for your presentation. And I particularly like your idea of incorporating and entrenching national values into the school curriculums from an early age. And the inclusivity you speak about in Mandelier. But we have also seen a clamor for what would, in some quarters, look like ethnic-based counties and constituencies in view of your proposal on inclusivity and entrenching national values in our school curricula. And also the fact that our children, many of our children now are not very attached as their parents are to their ethnicities. What would your view be in the establishment of those counties and constituencies that are more ethnic-based than anything? Then on the electoral reforms, I think Honorable Catherine has asked, maybe just to reinforce, would you prefer a selection panel mode of getting to reconstitute the IEBC commission, or more of a political class-driven appointment process to reconstitute that selections panel? And on the audit of elections, you propose that audit of the elections to be carried out within 2 to 3 months after inauguration for the country to move on. Do you mean an audit of the election results or an audit of the electoral processes?
That seems to be all. That seems to be all. Please just answer in less than 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you on the questions. On political parties, my sister, Mandelier is national, and you have heard the numbers. And as I sit here, our members are drawn basically from 47 counties. It's half and half. We are very careful in some pronouncements. If I come in camera, we can share with you. Allow me not to get deeper into that. We would not want the women to be more divided than we have been. We called for dialogue. We are old mothers. The people you see here are not young apart from these girls. Allow me not to go there, please.
Thank you.
In camera, I can come in. The audit 2022, I was also quite clear about that. We left the current 2022 to the leadership here, His Excellency the President and Prime Minister. Allow us not to go deeper into that because, as I have said, the reasons are very clear. National majority leaders talked about liking the values and the kids and the now counties which are more ethnic-based. I think we would be asking for you to agree with us. The details, we can, Mheshimiwa, work on them. We can produce you a paper in the next 24 hours, giving you the way we look at it, the details, because all those 47 counties have our members right to the ward. We have heard their voices, and most of these women are in charge, are in more. So if you allow us, we can present you a paper within the next 24 hours. And that will tell you, will give you an answer. On the selection panel of the mode, what we did not say was deliberate. It's not that we had not read the question. Allow us not to go there. Allow us not to go there. Here we want one country. When I see my brother there, Eugene Wamalwa, and I remember the journey is one nation, and we are here to tell you, we must move forward, God giving us grace as a nation. My sister, where I have not gone deep, I can give you a confidential letter. I used to be a government civil servant, a secretary. I can provide you a confidential letter. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we shall now excuse you.
Before we wind up,
yes,
there is a call from the lady from Mombasa. we have something to say off cuff and allow her just to say it. She has come all the way from Lamu, and the other leaders will have to for them.
Okay. Mimi nitakuwa as brief as possible. Kwanza natoa shukrani kwa serikali yetu vile imetufanyia Lamu. Nasikia Lamu, nasikia ile tunabandikwa hayafai, lakini ni ya urongo na kweli. Tunashukuru pia Mheshimiwa Kandi kwa kazi nzuri anayofanya on the ground. Anasikiliza, anaona, anachukua maoni. Kwa hivyo we are happy with that. Tunawaombea mbarikiwe. Kitu ambacho kimenichoma sana mimi mpaka nisema lazima nizungumze leo ni kuhusu mambo ya LGBT. Kwa kisisi tunaita kaumulut. Hasa anaweza kumkubaliana.
LGBTQ.
Hii ni kitu ambacho sisi wa mama wa Coast, wa Lamu, na hata nadhani hawa mama walioko hapa wote, hakuna mtu atakubali mambo kama haya. Mtoto wake amezaliwa dume wa kuchunga mji na tunawatahidi tunafanya celebrations na ceremonies, alafu kesho mwambie ageuzwe akuwe mwanamke. Sidhani kama hiyo itawezekana na hatupendelei. Sijui kama kuna kina mama hapa, hata nyinyi ambao mko hapo, hata nyinyi mababa
pia
wanataka dume yako alafu kesho apige piga.
Asante.
Alafu kitu kingine ni kwamba wacha niongeze kidogo tafadhali, ni muhimu. Tafadhali. Mungu mwenyewe hakuwa mjinga. Saila alisema aumbe mwanamke, Mungu hakuwa mjinga. Kwa hivyo sisi pia tufuate zile dini zetu zimetufundisha na mila. Si tukubali maneno tu ya ugeni, kisha kuna side effects haya maneno. Unajua mtoto si kupiga kiuno peke yake, hata anavaa pad, unajua? Anaharibika, anapata infection. Wanawake wanapata mpaka makansa. Kweli tunataka watoto wetu tumezaa, tumelea, tumewasomesha, kesho tuwe na mambo kama haya jamani? Mimi napinga kabisa mambo ya LGBT, naomba na nyinyi nyote mpinge kama mimi. Hawa watoto wetu warimeni madume. Hasa ni pia wewe na watoto wa dume, warimeni dume. Hakuna mambo ya kuuza watoto.
Asante sana. Asante sana. Now we shall excuse
for those mumesikia mama kwa niaba ya mama wamesikia kwa niaba ya patron wetu Mama Phoebe Asio, who is out of the country on medical grounds, acting patron Mama Zibora Kitoni, the entire board, the entire membership, and the team here. We wish you well, and we are looking forward for very successful negotiations. We continue being on our knees to pray for you. This is one country. We do not have another one. May the good Lord bless you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have the NCIC come forward.
Oh.
Kindly assist them to disengage, please.
NCIC.
In the interest of time. Salimiana baadaye tafadhali.
Or Dr. Mutumbo if he's quicker. Aya, karibuni, Chairperson NCIC and your commissioners. I think I'll do a quick introduction from my right, Honorable Amina, from Kilifi County, Malindi. Mheshimiwa Eugene Wamalwa, I'm sure you all know him. My co-chair, temporary, the deputy delegation leader, Honorable Pio Wandai. Mheshimiwa Senator Omar, Mheshimiwa Catherine Wambilianga, and co-chair Kimani Shongwa. We have apologies from our co-chair who will be joining us in the afternoon, His Excellency Kalonzo Musyoka, Governor Cecily Mbarire, and Senator Aaron and Senator Mugani, who are in Turkana County. Aribuni, if you can do the same quick introduction, Chairperson, and go straight to your presentation in less than 20 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair and co-chair, and members of this bipartisan national dialogue. With me are all the commissioners. On my immediate right is Wambui Nyutu, who is the vice chair of the commission. Next to her is Engineer Philip Okundi, and Sam Corner at the other end. And on my left, we have Dr. Danivas Makori. We have Honorable Dorcas Kedogo, and we have Honorable Farah. And then we have the CEO, the acting CEO, and the secretary to the commission. So that is that's the team that we have. First of all, we want to congratulate you on being entrusted with such responsibility. The whole country and even beyond Kenya are looking up to you, and therefore we wanted to really say that we wish you well, because the outcome of this process is going to be extremely important for this country. Thank you for your invitation. We were invited and asked to come to make an oral presentation, and we were asked to make that presentation based on the 5 areas of issues that you are dealing with.
And Chairman, maybe if you have another copy of the document you are reading, you could share with our Secretariat to make copies for us.
Chair, we are making an oral presentation, as I say, but we have copies that will make copies for you. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. So what we decided to do, Chair, because we were asked to address either all of the 5 issues or some of them, our decision was to address only some of them, and that these are the ones that we consider to be relevant to our work. And there are 5 main issues that we have identified that we wanted to present. Number 1 is the issues related to structural inequalities, because this is what led to the problem of 2007-2008 conflicts, which led to the formation of, among others, the short-term TJRC through the Justice and Reconciliation Commission. And that was from the National Dialogue and Reconciliation Agreement of 1st February 2008. And then following that, the TJRC did its work, presented its report and recommendations, but then it was found that it was necessary to have a more long-term commission to continue to address the issues that led the country into what has been the worst type of elections-related conflicts and violence in this country. And that is how the NCIC was formed. And so that is why we feel, Chair, that addressing structural inequalities and disputes that were addressed by TDRC, but have not been resolved. And our understanding is that the report and the recommendations of the TDRC now lie with Parliament. We wanted to recommend here that this report be now acted upon, and Parliament has that responsibility. And as NCIC, we consider ourselves as the most natural successor to TJRC on long-term basis, and we are ready to implement those recommendations, because unless and until those recommendations are implemented, will continue to have the problems that led to that problems continue. Secondly, and related to that, Chair, is the issue of historical grievances and unresolved issues, especially to do with the land, to do with the boundaries, the boundary disputes, and which, although had been addressed in the TJRC report, have not been implemented. And the historical marginalization, which devolution clearly has addressed but not adequately, also continue to be an issue related to historical grievances. And we know, Chair, that this is what led to the need for equalization fund, and this has done very well in terms of addressing the historical grievances, but it has not adequately addressed it. We also wanted to say that related to funds, that what has been already seen here as the need for, and you have it as item number 4, entrenching funds into the Constitution. We wanted to add to this that the constitutional commissions and independent offices should also be funded in a way that is entrenched in the Constitution. And in the same breath, we recommend strongly that the NCI Act, which created the NCIC, should be anchored in the Constitution. And it is that way that if the funding then is also assured, then our work, which I must say is very much affected by lack of sufficient funding, that also will be addressed, because we feel very strongly that funding that for our commission especially, we are only funded for the current budget. As far as the work of peace building and other related work is concerned, this is mostly funded through donor money. And we feel that the work that we do in peace building is so important that its funding should not be left to the donors. In fact, our submission here is that what is considered as hardware and software in dealing with the conflicts, hardware, of course, being done by armed forces, but the software which follows and which ensures lasting peace is not funded sufficiently. And we feel that Exchequer should fund it, and it should be considered as part of the national values, the ethos of Article 10, and that it is actually to do with the sovereignty of this country. And therefore, just as it has been recommended here to have the funding of national government constituencies, national government affirmative action, and the Senate Oversight Fund, we should also add here the funding of constitutional commissions and independent offices should be included. The third area, Chair, is to do with the implications of youth unemployment. We wanted to present this, Chair, here because in the hotspots mapping that NCIC did in the run-up to the elections, our findings were, in some cases, really very worrying, in that the proliferation of armed gangs in this country is not given adequate attention. And particularly because we now have thousands of very well-educated young people who are unemployed. And they are using their knowledge. Some of them are scientists, others are biologists, etc., chemists. And that is important to recognize that the nature and even, if I would call it, the quality of the violence that these gangs are doing is now beyond what is traditionally seen as the problem of youth. We realized that if we look at this, then youth unemployment is a time bomb which, if not addressed adequately, will clearly lead to this country exploding. It is for that reason, therefore, we wanted to say that we address the issue of youth and unemployment in a way that any funding that would be used in this, including the funding of, as we have said, the constitutional commissions, and particularly in our case, NCIC, we are very much involved in this work that we feel when adequately funded, we will deal with the issue of youth unemployment. The fourth issue is what we call the national architecture for peace building and cohesion. I would say that when you consider the peace building in this country, the arena of peace builders, if you wish, and the peacemakers is both congested and contested. And unless there is proper coordination at the national level, then it remains that because many of these, some of them are briefcase peacemakers and peace builders, and there is even contradiction in what is being done by different bodies, including state actors and non-state actors. When it comes to state actors alone, we see that there is, the NSC, the Small Arms Committee, the NCIC itself, and many others, and not to talk of civil society organizations who have taken it upon themselves to do peace building. And unless this is well coordinated at the level of, at the national level, where there is a clear understanding of who is doing what, where, and how, then it means that peace building could itself be a source of conflict. And that is why we feel that the coordination at the national level is absolutely critical, because this will therefore also lead to addressing the issues of Article 10 of the Constitution. Now, for this to happen, certainly there has to be well-funded commissions and institutions that are doing that work. In our work, we have seen that peace dividends are critical. A good example here is what happened only last week in Samburu. For the last half a year, Chair, we have been addressing the issue of Moranism, and we have reached a point where we launched a program of Warani SME groups, starting with Samburu, and we are cooperating with the Ministry of Cooperatives to address this issue, because what the Morans said is they will leave the cattle rustling and banditry only if they have alternative means of livelihood. And alternative means of livelihood can actually be provided for, and the ministry has assured us that they will do just that. That is why I'm bringing the issue of peace dividends here, because once they form themselves in groups, then they will be funded, they will leave banditry and cattle rustling, and this will resolve one of the outstanding triggers of violence and conflicts in this country. We also have another example, Chair, of how peace dividends can be handled, and this is the cooperation, again, between peace and development in the Amaya Triangle, where Baringo, Samburu, Laikipia, and Isiolo came together, and we consider this as a model of how regions can come together and be able to make the best of the funds like equalization fund that we have referred to. And therefore, we want to recommend that, again, coming to software, the interface between software and hardware. Fifth and finally, Chair, is the issue of boundaries. In our work, we have come to realize that out of the 47 counties, that 3 have boundary disputes. That 3 counties have boundary disputes. And we want to say that the processes that are addressing the existing issues should be taken into account when it comes to delimitation of boundaries. The delimitation of boundaries, which will be done by IEBC, should be done in such a way that it will not exacerbate the existing boundary disputes or deepen structural inequalities or lead to violent conflicts among communities. It is in this way that we as NCIC would like to look at the issue of boundaries. And these boundaries are part of what we are calling structural inequalities. We know that from history in this country, it was a policy of colonial government to create a landed class and a landless class, the Swinnerton Plan, those who would remember this. And this, unfortunately, was not adequately handled by the independent Kenya, because even the session paper of number 10 of 1965, although it had done very well, it actually did not address the issue of structural inequalities, inequalities that were created by government as a matter of policy. It is for that reason, therefore, Chair, we feel that we will need now to address this issue and avoid further problems that can actually be resolved. And we look forward very much to the findings and report of this committee to really address those issues, because unless and until these problems that we have identified are addressed, then we will continue to experience violent conflicts, and this country will not be peaceful and united and cohesive as we would like it to be. Thank you, Chair, and I think I have stayed within the time that you gave me. We will, as I have said, provide a text for the Secretariat on
Thank you, Chair.
Orally.
Maybe if I'll be the first one to go, just from where you've ended on matters cohesion and boundaries. We have seen a number of representations, people asking for counties in the delimitation of boundaries, some constituencies that are, in some views, largely ethnic-based. What would your view be in the establishment of new constituencies or new county boundaries that are largely along ethnic lines? Omar?
Chairman Ribu, my first question is, in your own estimation, has there been any much progress made in terms of healing the ethnic divisions we have in this country? Because even as we go into politics, we see the SI unit of political mobilization is largely ethnic groups. So I just want to appreciate your appreciation of how much progress you have made since the establishment of the NCIC, not just your term and even the terms of others. In terms of the clear line between hate speech and freedom of speech is quite a thin one. I remember once NCIC did a report which I found extremely insightful. And I was at that time at the KNCHR. So I used that report into an article. And I was very happy that the same, then one of the members of parliament, he was a PNU activist, was now a minister for trade, complained to the NCIC that I had committed the act of hate speech. Actually, Chalo investigated that case and cleared me of any wrongdoing because it was the NCIC report that I was citing. At what point must we be audacious in terms of addressing our ethnic configurations? I think Kenyans try to sanitize a lot of things. We must sometimes be able to appreciate speech no matter how much we dislike of it. If you look at the Trump administration, it is largely about white supremacy, but it doesn't, that's the strength of democracy. I should be able to stand up and sometimes pinpoint the problem as it is. The only good thing that supported me at that time was the fact that it was based on an NCIC report of the Kibaki administration, that Kibaki's appointments and hitherto that point were extremely skewed, in fact, not only regional, but very nyeri. The third one, in terms of structural, systematic marginalization and exclusion. I'm one of those who always claims to have systematic marginalization and exclusion, like Commissioner Farah there probably is there for the same reason. But how is there a programmatic way of handling it? Because when you elevate me, you usually sometimes just say that you've elevated me, pulled me out of marginalization, but left the rest of the community there. So I see that a lot with the minority and marginalized groupings. I see a plethora of appointments that go to individuals, but I never see those communities necessarily pulling themselves out of marginalization. Do you have a programmatic strategy so that we can then appreciate better? And do you think that this systematic or systemic abuses, marginalization, alienation are the reasons why there's this violent elections or contestation for power and the fallout? And how much have you done in terms of trying to address that by way of advisory to government?
Amina. Thank you, Chair. I'm reading here one of the mandates of NCIC. The mandate is to facilitate and promote equality of opportunity, good relations, harmony, and peaceful coexistence between persons of different ethnic, religious, and racial communities of Kenya, and to advise the government on all aspects thereof. I think that is true, right? So my question for you will be on the issue of national unity. We have had serious claims of shareholding in government, public appointments, and development in the country. What is NCIC doing about it, and what advice would you give the government?
Right. I think that should be it. Eugene, you have something?
Yes, yes.
One last
allow Eugene to.
Thank you. I think just picking up from what Honorable Amina has said, under Article 131(2) of our Constitution, the President is supposed to be the symbol of national unity. And not just a symbol, it is his cardinal duty to ensure national unity. And the Deputy President is supposed to be the principal assistant in that regard. Looking at this election that has just ended, the country was divided right in the middle. Half of the country went yellow for Kenya Kwanza, the other half went blue for Azimio after the elections, instead of dialoguing, we went to the streets. We are here because of the initiative between our two principals of the two coalitions, who said, no, let us not sort out this matter on the streets. Let us sit and talk to each other instead of talking at each other. What Amina is asking is where we have the principal deputy actually undermining these very talks and talking the language of division instead of unity, which is the principal duty to ensure national unity, and the country being a country of shareholders and non-shareholders. If we were to go that way, half of the country will be shareholders, the other half will be non-shareholders. What have you done, particularly and specifically with the utterances made by the Honorable Rigathi Gachagua? Not once, repeatedly. We haven't heard from you. And if you have taken steps, we would like to know from you what those steps are.
Okay. Just one comment. Chairman Reverend Kobia, I've known you since the Mfungamano days. Are you sure you really want to implement the TGFC report?
Thank you. Let's have the responses, please. If we could have them in under 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let me, I would like to ask some of the commissioners to address some of this. I would like, on the issue of constituencies, Commissioner Danvers Makori, to take that up. That came, especially when it comes to the demarcation and all that, and whether, you know, the healing and reconciliation has taken place, and how the boundaries could be ethnicized. I think that's the point that he wrote. Then I'll have Commissioner Sam Corner to address the issue of systemic and structural marginalization that was asked by Honorable Hassan. And the question of Honorable Amina on the mandate and the addressing and advising the government on issues of national unity, which has been expanded by Honorable Eugene Wamalo, Commissioner Farah to take that up in that order, so that and we have 2 minutes each, it seems. But
1 minute each, actually. Let's proceed.
Okay, those are the questions that came, and to Commissioner Honorable Hassan, yes, from Mfungamano, yes, we certainly would want to implement the TJRC recommendations, really, because we feel that unless we are bold enough, we take the courage to address them, however difficult, and I know they'll be divisive, but we are prepared. And that's why we are asking to be enabled financially to address it, because it will be a contribution to the national unity and the cohesion of this country.
Yes, in any order, please. Just proceed.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. I think I will mention something about the question of reconciliation as a country. And I'll begin by saying the story of reconciliation has been a sad story of missed opportunities. I said missed opportunities because at the time the former late President Mwai Kibaki was elected in 2002, that was a moment for Kenya to cohere and for the leadership to look at the country and create opportunities for people to reconcile. We missed that opportunity. We missed an opportunity in 2007 when the Kofi Annan Kenya National Dialogue and Reconciliation process gave us the 4 agenda items, which if we had pursued them sustainably and consistently, Kenya would not be at the state we are in now. We missed an opportunity in 2013 when the current President William Ruto and Uhuru Kenyatta came together. That was a moment for Kenya even to reconcile the Kikuyus and the Kalenjins and for the rest of the country to be brought forward. And of course, we had the TJRC report, another missed opportunity. We missed another opportunity in BBI the current National Dialogue Committee, this particular committee, is a moment again for Kenya to be courageous enough and confront the past. But I want to say the reason why we've missed those opportunities is because when a moment comes for us to engage in reconciliation, it is only important if the politicians are unhappy. I want to say every day, including today, there are Kenyans who will die because of violence, just the same way Kenyans die during maandamano or protest. There are Kenyans who are protesting their conditions or their situation. But so long as the politicians are happy, we don't take the feelings of Kenyans as important. So all these national processes end when the politicians share the cake and they are comfortable. That's why we are saying it's a sad story of missed opportunities. It's a sad story. It only becomes important if the politicians are unhappy, but the people of Kenya are hurting every day. The people of Kenya have grievances that they want their leadership to take them heads on and with courage so that we can move forward as a country. Because so long as we have grievances, so long as you have people who are feeling they are not part of the processes, it is very difficult for Kenya to move forward. So we need to take the agenda of reconciliation, the agenda of cohesion, as a national conversation, not a political process that begins and ends with the politicians. Thank you.
Thank you. On the question of delineation, and, new constituencies and the counties where there are ethnic or the drawn ethnic lines, it's true actually. This is a reality. First of all, by law, our constitution is supposed to unite our country. And when we gave ourselves a new constitution, especially in the revolution, we were supposed to, as much as celebrate diversity, be one nation. The reality is, if you look at even just the basic countries that are there, starting from the north to the south, they're named after ethnic groups. Implicitly, what you're saying is exclusive to that. And that's why we have the conflict raging in Kerio Valley, Suguta Valley, is because you have counties, county belongs to this ethnic group vis-a-vis. Our proposal as NCAC, given that we work extensively in these regions, is first of all to rename some of these counties, to move away from ethnic identities, because this is what actually is taking our country back instead of forward. Secondly, in the delineation that IEBC is supposed to do by law, it must be done with a lot of consultation, and especially of the 290 constituencies. If you look at them, close to 70% are still within ethnic lines or clan lines, so amplifying ethnicity and tribalism. So for us, they need to be withdrawn so that there's no exclusivity, but inclusivity in all these counties. Thank you very much.
Finally?
Before finally, we can allow one lady to speak.
Thank you very much, co-chairs. I was given the most hot potato to respond to, but thank you, Chairman, for doing that, because you know I'm a politician and really I don't fear. I will say what is in my head. The mandate of the NCIC, vis-a-vis what the Deputy President has said about the shareholding, and what we have done as NCIC about it. We have done nothing about it, and I think we will not do anything about it, because the context of the statement is where I sit is about government sharing. It's not about the country per se, but it is common practice all over the world that any government that comes to power shares power and positions with the people who supported that government mostly. And that is where he's coming from, the Deputy President. And so it is world over.
You're actually right.
In America.
He explained that to you, or this your interpretation?
Well as a commission,
you're actually right.
I'm talking from practice and what is in the world. And me and you, Mheshimiwa, and I know that even in America, Mr. Biden has shared his government with the people who supported him.
He has appointed his ambassadors and everybody and from his backyard and the people who are with his party. And that's where the deputy president is coming from. As NCIC, we must be very careful on where we touch. So therefore, it is not about the national unity. You can see the president and the deputy president being everywhere in this country. They are in Luo Nyanza, where my friend Wandai comes from. He is in Northeastern. He is in the coast. The president and the deputy president are trying to stitch the country together in their policy. But this is about how the government position is shared. That is where I put that case and to rest. Of course, the president is a symbol of unity. No doubt about it. And that's what he's doing it every day. That's why he's taking projects to all corners of this country. That's why he's sleeping in some counties. That's why he's taking the cabinet meeting in so many counties in this country. And therefore, the issue should be looked into the lens of government construction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that very in-depth explanation.
I think we need to conclude now.
Yeah.
Just conclude, please. Yeah. Just conclude.
One more, Chair. The issue of hate speech versus freedom of expression. The Vice Chair, Wambui Nyutu, will answer it.
Thank you very much to the co-chairs. The question on freedom of speech versus hate speech, I think it lies right into the Constitution, Article 33, that gives every Kenyan the freedom of expression, the freedom to seek and impart information, as well as academic knowledge. But at the same time, the same Constitution limits the rights of freedom of expression, and it limits it to incitement to violence, propaganda for war, and all other aspects of expressions that may lead to war in the country. So we know hate speech is any utterance. Hate speech, according to our definition, is any utterance that may lead to, ethnic polarization and incitement to violence and any war in the country. So it is very clear in the Constitution the difference between hate speech and freedom of expression. Thank you very much.
Well, with that, then, chairs, we wanted to really say just one point to inform you that we have just concluded doing ethnic audit on employment of the counties. And in another 2 weeks, we'll be releasing our findings. Then we would want also to do ethnic audit at the national level, the national government. And then after that, we'll do national cohesion index. These are very important because they are the indicators of where we are when it comes to cohesion, when it comes to unity, and particularly because of the findings, the basic findings of ethnic audit of the counties when it comes to employment, we are actually retrogressed. It was better when we did the last audit 4 years ago, and this is something that we'll be bringing up.
Can you share that report once it's launched with us? And even recommendations as to how you can enforce some kind of ethnic balance in terms of appointments? Because that's a report. How do you enforcement? If there was an enforcement regime, people would not do it.
Yes, Mheshimiwa, we will share it with this committee once it is out, and it includes what we have recommended to be done in order to alleviate the situation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for that presentation. We shall now excuse you. Our next group, please.
Our next group is Dr. Mutubwa. You two, at least now I know you. I've heard so much about you now. At least I've heard you. Yeah. Asante sana, Reverend. Pray for us. Daktari, I believe you know the members here.
Yes, yes, I know most of them.
That's Honorable Amina Mnyazi, MP Malindi. That's Honorable Eugene Wamalwa, member of this committee. That's Honorable Catherine Wambilianga, Women Rep Bungoma, and also a member of this committee. There is apologies from Governor Cecily Mbarire, who is attending to some event on the Tourism Week in Embu. There is apologies from the two senators, the majority leader in the Senate, and Honorable Senator Aaron Cheriot and Honorable Omugeni. The Deputy President will be joining us later today, who is the delegation leader on that other side. I'm sitting in myself for Honorable Kimani Shungwa, who has just stepped out for business in Parliament. I am Hassan Umar, member of IALA, and our able co-chair today, who's also the deputy leader of the delegation from Azimio, is Honorable Pio Andai, who's also the minority leader. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And
if we can restrict ourselves to the 20 minutes and then some interaction. I think the letter was explicit.
Thank you very much. I will be very brief. First, I want to thank the committee for inviting me. My name is Dr. Wilfred Mutubwa. I have put in my contribution in writing, dated 8 September 2023. I have addressed 3 thematic areas based on my background. I am an academic. I have also interacted with the electoral process, representing parties in election petitions, and also as a member of the Political Parties Disputes Tribunal. The views I give, Chairman, are personal, my personal views, based on my understanding of the law and based on my understanding of the circumstances under which this committee is looking at these matters. Chairman and members,
The delegation you're having?
These are my associates.
Okay.
Yes, I will introduce them. This is Eric, Madam Kijala, and Mr. Joel. Those are all my students and associates in the office. Thank you very much. I will be very brief, Mr. Chairman. My contribution is in the area of the entrenchment of the office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary and some contributions on the area of electoral law reform. Mr. Chairman and members, the beginning point is to say that when we gather here in such an occasion, we are really taking an introspective view of our nationhood and our constitutional framework with a view to understand, number one, our legal history and our political culture. Mr. Chairman, my first proposal in terms of the entrenchment of the office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary is founded on the understanding of our political history, our legal culture, and the framework within which we operate currently, the governance structure and the electoral system. Chairman, the long and short of my presentation on that particular aspect is to suggest that the Office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary, in essence, in an abstract view, has been with us for a long time. In fact, if you psychoanalyze the processes that we have gone through, and I had the team before me speaking about it, 2008 constitutional amendment under the National Code, previously in various forms, we have had the semblance of this office in actual fact and not always necessarily in a legal structured way. So, Chairman, the suggestion that I have put forth is to say that the Office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary is an office that in itself is one of the offices that have been set out in our Constitution, though not in very express terms. When I read the Constitution Article 152 and I look at the Constitution of the Cabinet itself, there is reference to cabinet secretaries without specific reference to the prime cabinet secretary. So the question has always been, where exactly is this office located in the architecture of our governance system? And Chairman and members, my view is that the prime cabinet secretary's position need not be entrenched in the constitution by way of an amendment of the constitution. The challenge we have had as a country in terms of framing our constitution and legislative drafting is that we are too prescriptive, perhaps a reflection of our own insecurities in terms of drafting legislation and constitutions. So that, in a sense, whenever we take time to draft legislation or even draft the constitution, we are anticipating, always anticipating difficulties. The view I take is that in drafting constitutional provisions, you have a framework. You have a general principle approach to governance. And when you look at the manner in which this constitution is framed, the office of cabinet secretaries is an office that is open in terms of the persons that will occupy the offices and the various dockets that will be created. However, the prime cabinet secretary, in my view, the prime cabinet secretary is simply a first among equals. A first among equals is somebody who occupies a position not necessarily outside the framework that already exists, but a first among equals. An office that, for instance, if you look at the constitution, it does not say that the president will appoint a minister for agriculture. But there is a cabinet secretary, 24 maximum, and you will see that the discretion is left to the appointing authority to appoint such person. And I think when we look at our political history, one of the things that stands out is that the Constitution creates power, then disperses the powers, and creates checks and balances. What I have noticed, and what many scholars will tell you, is that in our setting, the disbursement of power is more or less usually done in a horizontal rather than vertical way. Because horizontally, you bring more people on the table, there is a feeling of inclusion, there is a feeling of participation, and there is therefore generally a sense of belonging in the state. And to say that this horizontal disbursement of power would only, in the executive seat, in the office of the president and cabinet secretaries, is to suggest that perhaps the way we have agreed to govern ourselves is to have a clear hierarchical order of leadership. But this office presents a unique opportunity because one of the things I see as an advantage, and looking at what the Tanzanians have, for instance, and the Ugandans, although the Ugandan prime minister is actually a member of parliament, the prime cabinet secretary, the prime minister, is actually a person who is an executive, a chief executive. We have had comments in our system, or in our system of governance, that the president is a vision carrier. He is also the chief executive. He is also the implementing agency. And perhaps it would have been a bit more useful for the president to have a CEO, a person that can actually do the nuts and bolts. When you look at the Ugandan constitution, for instance, and the Tanzanian constitution, this is the office of the prime minister, or our equivalent of cabinet, prime cabinet secretary, is a person who runs government. Is the CEO who reports to the vision carrier, the person who has the mandate of the people. He may not possess popular mandate by election, but he's a person who can be appointed to participate in the running of government as a chief executive on behalf of the president, with the ultimate responsibility being with the president. And you look at when you look at the provisions in the Tanzanian constitution and the Ugandan constitution, the suggestion is that the prime minister is the person who conducts the day-to-day running of government, and the president therefore has the overall conduct of running government, but through this very specific office that has that function. In our context, the question has always been, do we need to amend the constitution to anchor this particular office in that constitution? Now, as I said, the office of Prime Cabinet Secretary is an office of Cabinet Secretary. Just like you would have Prime Cabinet Secretary, you would have Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture, but he is a first among equals appointed within the same context of the constitutional provision under Article 152. I do not subscribe to the view that the office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary will of necessity require a constitutional amendment. And I want to draw an analogy with the judiciary, how it works in the judiciary. We have the President of the Court of Appeal. It's not a constitutional office. He's a first among equals. The President of the Court of Appeal is a statutory office under a constitutional statutory, a constitutional legislation. A constitutional legislation, as we understand it, is a legislation that gives effect to a constitutional provision. So it is almost read as though or together with the Constitution. And when you have an office created by legislation through a statutory legislation that finds anchorage in a constitutional provision, my view is that that provision sits properly within our constitutional framework. And there are many decisions in that respect. So my view is that the manner of entrenchment of this office is simple, by way of legislation, and this legislation is anchored on the Constitution, and borrowing from many other practices, including our own here. We have the principal judge in the Land and Environment Court. So perhaps it is time for us to have some legislation in terms of the organization of the executive organs of government, and particularly the office of the cabinet secretaries. And that is where you will find that the office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary can be properly designated in terms of the functions.
Something like Cabinet Secretaries Act.
Absolutely, something like that. Or yes, or some general organization of the executive arm of government in a legislation that is anchored in the Constitution. That is my.
As you continue, sorry.
Yes.
You didn't touch on the vertical dispersal of power.
Yes.
I was keen to.
Yes, the dispersal of power is deliberately vertical in the executive because of the possibility of conflict or overlapping responsibilities. However, I was saying that in the context of arguments which I have had, that to elevate the office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary into a constitutional office may create an untidy situation where there is conflict with the Deputy President, for instance. But when you look at comparative jurisdictions in other places, there is absolutely no cause for worry. We have Deputy Presidents who coexist perfectly in a constitutional setting, in a Republican or democratic system, with a Deputy President. Now, the Prime Cabinet Secretary, in my view, would be coordinator of government business, for instance, would be chair of cabinet subcommittees because he's a cabinet secretary, while the Deputy President remains the principal assistant of the President. And the constitutional implications of presidency versus the Prime Cabinet Secretary can also be seen in terms of constitutional succession of the President. So there is a clear demarcation of the roles, and statute helps to only speak in details to those ones. I hope that is clarified.
And please, we are not doing very well on time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I will not touch on the other ones. I have actually captured them in writing. My experience has been, one of the things I have suggested is a repeal of Article 88(4)(e) of the Constitution. 88(4)(e), for simple reasons. There is an overlap in the mandate of the IEBC and the Political Parties Tribunal, which has been problematic ever since we promulgated this constitution. Now, there are two forums for resolution of pre-election disputes, the IEBC itself and the Political Parties Tribunal. What we have experienced for the last 13 years is what is called forum shopping. Now, forum shopping is aided by the vague provisions in the statute creating the Political Parties Tribunal and the Constitution. Now, the PPDT is the Kriegler Compromise Election Court. In fact, the proposal was to have a completely different election court from the ordinary courts, because you remember, people were very low on confidence in terms of confidence in our ordinary judicial system to deal with election disputes. Now, the conflict is this way. You find that the IEBC has to determine disputes between complainants and officers of the IEBC, because a complaint would always be that the returning officer has done or failed to do this. Now, the returning officer is actually an employee of the commission, and you need an arbiter that is independent and impartial. You cannot have a judicial system where one is a judge of his own cause, and that is the difficulty that is created.
In pre-election, how does IEBC become returning officer?
Absolutely, because the disputes that go to the IEBC regard the nomination of candidates. The nomination of candidates is the preserve, is a function of the IEBC. If you return your papers to a returning officer and you have a dispute with a returning officer because he thinks you are not a Kenyan citizen, for instance, your forum of dispute resolution is before the IEBC. And the disputant is yourself, the candidate, and an officer of the IEBC, before commissioners of the IEBC, resolving nomination disputes because of challenges which you allege are against the IEBC. The point is to take these disputes away from the IEBC. Whether you take them to the Political Parties Tribunal or take them to the High Court, the idea is to find a forum that has independence in the true sense of the word, and not just cosmetic, saying that these are commissioners. An institution cannot be a judge of its own processes in an impartial process, judicial process. That is the thinking. We have put it down in writing. We have suggested the ways it can be done. And because of the pressure of time, I will not go into the details. Thank you.
One question.
Yes, sir.
You talk about security of tenure of the PCS.
Yes.
The irony of that is that you want the president to appoint somebody to run the affairs of his government, and you actually had said that the political authority is the vision holder, is the president.
Yes, absolutely.
Appoints a PCS, who then somehow within his cabinet assumes the security of tenure. Don't you think that is a bit of a political folly?
Politically, it may be folly.
Just note down.
Yes, okay, so let me take the questions then. Okay.
I mean,
but I like the suggestion that if in the event the constitutional way is difficult, then we can create a cabinet act or something of that nature and provide for the prime cabinet secretary.
Very well, thank you.
Okay, now, I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
I was waiting for him to finish. Okay. Now, back to the issue of prime cabinet secretary.
Yes.
And you will recall that even the Azimio coalition had a proposal to that effect prior to the elections. In fact, we called it the chief cabinet secretary. Same things, really. But then this one, we had not envisaged that we would have it entrenched in the constitution at all. But now this idea, now that we need to entrench this position of chief cabinet secretary in the constitution, is being interpreted in some quarters as simply a way of rewarding individual, securing the position of Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, for instance. And in a sense, it is causing